Today we're going to get ready to lay some paint down on the Proton pack. You can see that I've disassembled the pack the rest of the way since the end of the last video. Pulled the shell into two pieces and I've removed all the original decals. Next step before I actually lay some paint down is we're going to scuff the whole surface. We're going to break it down with a 320 grit or 400 grit sandpaper and just kind of remove all that plasticky sheen and then wipe it clean before we prime and paint. So I'm going to stop filming, I'm going to do all the sanding, and then we're going to come back and take a look. The other thing that I want to do before I start sanding, I'm going to remove this this plastic boss where the original ribbon cable went to make it a little more accurate. So we're going to cut that down flush to the pack. I'm also going to put some filler in the speaker hole because we're going to mount the speaker on the motherboard. So I'm getting ready to fill in the speaker holes. I'm going to start by putting some masking tape on the outside to cover the holes, and we're going to start to fill this from the inside. I'm going to be using some glazing and spot putty, some Bondo stuff. This dries very quickly, it's easy to work with, and we'll take a look. We'll probably fill this in from the inside, let that dry, peel off the tape and put a skim coat on the outside and then sand that down. And while I'm waiting for the filler to dry on the speaker holes, I went ahead and removed the post there where the ribbon cable goes in. You can see that came out nice and neat, and I'll show you how I did it, because I think most people try to get in here and trim that off flush with a saw blade of some sort of hacksaw blade, or maybe even a vibrating one. I went at it from the back, and I took a 7/8 inch unibit and drilled this out from the back, which allows me to remove that whole post as one piece because I just drilled it from the back, and eventually the wall thickness thins out to nothing and the entire post just comes right off in one piece. So nice and neat. Don't have to do any Bondo or repair work up here. It's just nice and clean. The other thing I want to do on this piece of the shell is sand down the copyright information there, just to make this a little bit nicer. So I'm going to do that too while I'm waiting for the filler to dry. We'll take a look, see how that turns out. Okay, so while the body filler was drying in the speaker holes, I started working on the top half of the shell, and I've got this all scuffed up. Was able to be pretty thorough with 320 grit sandpaper, breaking all the surfaces, pretty much everything I could get my fingers into to get this prepped. So that's in good shape. We're going to get this piece finished up now that the filler is dry on the speaker hole from the back. I'm going to flip it over, remove the tape, and we'll finish up the top of this. Just a note, when I filled this in, I actually just used my fingers to push the filler into the holes. So we'll see how this looks now from this side. I'm going to peel the tape off, which actually looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a skim coat to that to smooth that all out. The great thing is, since I'm going to be painting this pack with some texture, any little imperfections in this will be hidden, I think, by the texture. Same here where the copyright information was. I did get that all sanded off smooth. Seems like there was some imperfections in the molding there, but I think, again, the texture will mask any imperfections. So I'm going to go ahead, put another coat of body filler on this, let that dry, and then get this piece of the shell all sanded down, and then we'll go to the next steps. So I finished applying the body filler to the speaker holes, took 2 coats to make sure that was thoroughly covered. I also decided to go in and apply some filler to the marks from the injection molding process. I want to fill those in a little bit, especially this one here because the decal goes over that, and I think sanding that down nice and smooth will make the decal apply a little bit nicer. This one just was kind of ugly, so I'm going to see if I can sand that up. So next step is to sand this and get it ready for paint, and then we'll do our final surface prep and start laying down some primer. Okay, so I have finished all the sanding and surface prep of the parts. I've got the body filler feathered in very nice and smooth right here. I went ahead and rinsed the pack shell parts off just with some clean water to get any of the sanding dust off. Before I start applying any kind of paint finish, I'm going to go ahead and wipe down everything with some rubbing alcohol. This really gets any grease or other contaminants off. I also really like to wipe down any kind of plastic molded parts like this to get off any mold release agent that might still be on the plastic from when the part was manufactured. So that's a really nice way, simple, inexpensive way to get those parts clean. When I do that, I'm going to be wearing some gloves, not because it's caustic, but because at this point I'm going to be trying to keep these parts as clean as possible, so I don't want any of the oils from my hands on the parts. Probably a little bit overkill since we're not necessarily going for an automotive grade finish, but still something that I like to do. After I wipe the parts down with the rubbing alcohol, I'm ready to prime. This is the primer I'm going to be using. This is the Rust-Oleum professional grade primer. I really like the professional grade Rust-Oleum products. I find that they're extremely durable. When they dry, they're very hard, has a hard finish that is really impervious to scratches and chips and things like that. So I've used it over the course of many years on many different things, automotive projects. I had a motorcycle, actually I painted with it, and it was even impervious to gasoline and other caustic stuff. So really like the professional grade Rust-Oleum. I'm going to go ahead and get this ready, spray 2 or 3 light coats of primer, and then I'm going to let that primer dry for probably 2 days before I do anything else. I want to make sure that's completely cured before I start masking, because I'm going to mask parts that I don't want to have the texture on. So here are the parts after 2 light coats of primer. You can see I don't have 100% coverage. I don't think it's really important because you're really just trying to put down enough primer for the top coats to have something to bond to. So if it's a little bit misty, not a problem. So I'm going to let this primer cure for about 48 hours before I start masking, because I want to mask off areas that I don't want to have texture, like these little raised areas here and on the ladder, the bumper, a few other parts that we don't want to have texture. Once again, I like to let the paint or the primer cure for 48 hours before I put the tape on, because when I peel the tape off, I don't want to bring any of the primer off with it. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how I do the masking, and then we're going to be laying down the texture coats and the top coats and get this wrapped up.